The wind howled across the barren plains, carrying snowflakes that stung the skin like icy needles. The sky was a dull slate gray, heavy with the promise of another blizzard. In the midst of this frozen desolation, a lone horse galloped wildly, its hooves pounding the hard-packed snow with frantic urgency. Its coat was matted with frost, steam curling from its flared nostrils. And clinging desperately to its back was a man, battered and bruised, eyes wide with a mix of fear and disbelief. He had been tracking the horse for hours, ever since it had bolted from a distant corral, leaving its rider in a tangle of reins and frozen mud. The man, a young cowboy named Eli, had a reputation for his skill with wild horses, but this one was different. Something about its movements was almost deliberate, as if the animal carried a purpose beyond mere survival. And now, as the snow whipped around him like shards of glass, Eli had no choice but to hold on and hope the horse didn't throw him into the icy ground. The beast finally slowed, dragging him across the snow until a dark shape appeared through the storm, a ruined ranch, its wooden walls warped and splintered by years of neglect. The roof sagged under the weight of snow, and the fence surrounding the property lay broken and twisted. Smoke did not curl from any chimney, only silence and the raw, biting wind greeted him. The horse shuddered violently and then skidded to a stop in front of the main cabin. Eli tumbled off, landing hard on the frozen ground. Pain shot up his side, but he barely noticed. He had caught a glimpse of a figure through the cracked window. A woman. She was slumped in the corner, motionless. Her clothes were tattered, frost lining her hair and eyelashes. The sheer pallor of her skin made her look almost like a ghost in the dim light of the cabin. Eli didn't waste a second. He rushed inside, pulling her into his arms as if sheer force could revive her from the cold that had gripped her body. The smell of dust, mold, and charred would hit him as he stumbled across the room. Broken furniture lay scattered like the aftermath of some forgotten storm. There was a stove in the corner, but the fire had long since died, leaving only the cold, oppressive shadow of its metal frame. Eli laid the woman down gently on the floor, brushing snow from her hair. She shivered violently, teeth chattering like the hooves of a wild herd. Her name, he would later learn, was Clara, a lone rancher woman struggling to keep what little she had from slipping through her fingers. "Hey, hey, can you hear me?" he murmured, his voice trembling from the cold and adrenaline. She made no move, no sound. Panic clawed at his chest. In his experience, exposure to the snow for too long could be fatal in minutes. He needed a fire, warmth, anything. The cabin yielded little in terms of supplies. A stack of splintered wood sat by the wall, and he grabbed it desperately, arranging it in the stove. Sparks flew from his flint, and after what felt like an eternity, the kindling caught. A small flame blossomed, weak and hesitant, but it was enough to bring the first hint of warmth to the frozen room. Clara's hands twitched in the faint heat, and Eli let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "You're gonna be okay," he said, though he wasn't certain if that was true. His gaze swept the cabin. There were remnants of life, torn blankets, an empty tin cup, a photo frame smashed into pieces. Each fragment whispered stories of hard winters, endless toil, and a woman who had once fought to hold on. Eli noticed the corner of the cabin where snow had drifted inside through a broken window. He blocked it with what remained of an old shutter. The wind rattled the walls, and the horse pawed nervously outside. Somehow, in that moment, Eli felt like he had stumbled into a frozen grave, and he was the only one capable of keeping it from claiming its next victim. Clara finally stirred, her lips moving slightly, forming sounds Eli couldn't quite understand. She opened her eyes briefly, frostbitten, glazed, and pale, but then they fluttered shut again. Her body was fragile, almost weightless in his arms. Eli's heart ached. Whoever had built this ranch had long since left, and now she was its sole resident, clinging to the remnants of what little warmth and life remained. He wrapped her in his coat, pressing his own body against hers to transfer heat. The snow outside screamed in fury, yet inside, there was a fragile bubble of life. Eli had no idea how long she had been out here, abandoned and freezing, but he knew he had to do something. As the fire gained strength, he noticed a small, leather-bound journal on a table, covered in dust. Its pages were brittle, but the writing was neat, almost meticulous, an account of her struggles, her dwindling livestock, her fight to maintain the ranch against winter's cruel grip. Eli's stomach sank. This was a woman used to surviving alone, yet even the strongest could falter against nature's fury. The horse outside stamped its hooves, snorting into the wind, as if impatient for him to finish the rescue and return to its wild world. Eli gave it a sideways glance, half amused and half exasperated. "You're lucky," he muttered. "You brought me to her." For a moment, he let himself imagine a different future for the two of them, one where the ranch survived, where Clara's strength and determination weren't buried under snow and despair. But reality was harsh. He had a woman at the brink of life and death, a horse that might bolt again, and a storm that didn't care about anyone's dreams. The night settled in, dragging with it a bone-chilling darkness. Outside, the wind howled, carrying the snow like shards of glass against the ruined ranch. Inside, Eli tended the fire, feeding it splinters of wood, humming old cowboy tunes to ward off the encroaching fear. Occasionally, he looked down at Clara, her chest rising and falling, fragile yet persistent. He realized then that the Wild West was not just a place of freedom and adventure. It was a land of unforgiving winters, of people and animals alike battling for survival. And in this frozen corner, amid the ruins and the snow, a young cowboy and a desperate rancher woman found themselves bound together by fate, the wandering horse, and the cruel whim of nature. Eli's mind wandered, tracing her life through the journal, imagining the years of loneliness, the endless struggle to keep the ranch alive. He felt a fierce respect for her, a protective instinct that went beyond mere chivalry. She was family, even if they had just met. And in the unforgiving snow, family meant everything. The fire crackled, casting shadows across the broken walls. Eli could only hope that it was enough to stave off the night, enough to keep the frost from claiming her completely. He wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, tugging her close. "You're not going out there," he whispered. "Not tonight." And for the first time since the storm began, the silence of the abandoned ranch seemed less like a tomb and more like a sanctuary, a fragile, flickering sanctuary held together by courage, luck, and the relentless will to survive. Outside, the horse shifted, letting out a soft whinny, as if approving the fragile truce within the cabin. The storm would rage on, but for now, inside that ruined ranch, life clung stubbornly to the warmth of a fire and the heartbeat of a young cowboy determined to save a woman who had almost slipped away. Morning came slow and gray, the kind of dawn that barely dared to penetrate the storm's grip. The wind had not relented, and the snow lay thick over the roof, drifts curling around the broken fence like restless spirits. Inside, the cabin was a different world, a fragile island of warmth, where the fire crackled and the scent of pine smoke mingled with dust. Eli had not slept. He had sat by Clara's side, coaxing color back into her cheeks, murmuring old cowboy songs, and shoving his own hands into the tattered blanket to lend what warmth he could. Her eyes opened briefly, revealing a pale, stunned blue, the pupils dilated as if the night's cold had stretched time into eternity. She tried to speak, but her voice was a thin whisper. "Eli." He grinned, relief flooding him. "Hey, you're back with us. Don't try to talk too much yet. Just breathe." She swallowed, her throat raw. "Horse. The horse." He followed her gaze through the cracked window, where the wandering horse pawed at the snow outside, its breath steaming in the cold air. Eli shook his head. "He brought me to you. I think he knew what he was doing. Lucky bastard." He chuckled softly, but the humor barely touched the tension in his chest. Clara tried to sit up, shivering violently. Eli steadied her, tucking the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "You've been out there too long," he said. "Frostbite, near starvation. You had me worried sick." She blinked, dazed, and nodded weakly. I thought I'd make it alone." Her words came slowly, each one an effort. "You're not alone now," Eli said firmly. "You've got me, and this ranch, as broken as it is, won't see you go out into the snow again without a fight." She let out a shaky laugh, almost a sob, and Eli reached over to hold her hand. It was ice-cold, the skin stiff, but still alive. Somehow, that small spark of warmth reminded him that survival wasn't just about fire and blankets, it was about human touch, about someone refusing to let go. The cabin, though weak against the storm, held more than just frostbitten walls. Eli began inspecting the place, hunting for anything that could be useful. A pile of canned food, long forgotten, offered a meager but vital supply. A few bottles of water were half frozen, but with patience, he thawed them over the stove. As he worked, he noticed more details, the remnants of a life lived hard but proud. A faded photograph of a young girl, maybe Clara herself, with her father standing in front of a thriving ranch, horses lined up behind them. A diary, thick with entries about weather, livestock, and the loneliness of frontier life. Each page painted the picture of a woman who had fought tooth and nail against the harshness of the West, and now, the West had nearly taken her anyway. Eli felt a pang of admiration mixed with guilt. How could someone like her be left to fend for herself in such merciless snow? But the prairie was unforgiving, and survival was a privilege, not a right. He knew that better than most, having spent years learning that lesson the hard way on dusty trails and frozen plains. "Clara," he said softly, watching her lean weakly against the wall, "we need to get you warmed up properly. Sit tight." He lifted a blanket from the corner, stuffing it with what remained of old quilts, creating a makeshift bed beside the stove. He helped her lie down, resting her head on a small pillow, while he stoked the fire, coaxing the flames to life until they roared with reluctant strength. Outside, the snowstorm showed no mercy. The horse stamped, whinnied, and pawed at the ground, a restless sentinel in the freezing night. Eli tossed a rope outside, tying it loosely around the animal, hoping to keep it from wandering off again. The horse's coat shimmered with frost, the muscles tense beneath its shivering skin. It had chosen wisely, it seemed, bringing Eli into this ruined sanctuary. Hours passed. The storm dulled only slightly, a gray curtain of snow falling relentlessly over the plains. Eli fed Clara small sips of water and bits of canned food, watching as life slowly returned to her. Her fingers, once ice-cold, regained some warmth. Her cheeks flushed with pink, faint but unmistakable. He could see her strength returning, inch by inch, heartbeat by heartbeat. "You saved me," she whispered finally, voice hoarse, yet carrying a faint thread of disbelief. "I didn't do it alone," Eli replied, glancing at the horse, still tense but calm. "Your stubborn horse had a hand in this, too." She tried to smile, but it faltered. "I've been alone for so long," she said, eyes misting. "I didn't think anyone would find me before." He didn't let her finish. Instead, he clasped her hand firmly. "No one's leaving this cabin today. Not you, not me, not the horse." He smiled, trying to inject some warmth into the bleak, frozen air. "We'll survive this storm together." Clara's gaze wandered to the walls, to the broken windows, and the scattered remnants of her struggling ranch. Eli noticed the pain flicker across her face, a mixture of shame, exhaustion, and despair. "You've kept this place alive all this time," he said gently. "That's strength. Don't let it go unnoticed." For the first time, she let herself lean on someone else. The tightness in her shoulders relaxed, the tension in her jaw softened. The storm outside continued its merciless assault, but inside the ruined ranch, a fragile sanctuary had taken root. A cowboy, a woman, and a wild horse bound by survival, circumstance, and the thin, stubborn thread of humanity. By evening, Clara was able to sit up properly, sipping broth Eli had managed to heat over the stove. They talked in low voices, sharing stories of lost homesteads, wandering trails, and bitter winters. Eli learned that Clara had been on the brink of giving up entirely, the harsh weather and dwindling supplies leaving her no choice but to abandon hope. The storm had sealed her fate, until the horse had appeared, dragging him into the ruined ranch, into her life. The fire's glow flickered across her face, highlighting the resilience in her eyes, even amidst exhaustion. Eli realized then that she wasn't just a victim of the prairie. She was a fighter, someone who had survived years of hardship, and now had one more chance to prove it. Night fell, and the wind screamed against the cabin. The horse lay down outside, keeping watch over its human companions. Eli kept his chair close to Clara's bed, the warmth from the fire wrapping around them both. He understood that the frontier was cruel and unforgiving, but sometimes fate intervened in strange, unexpected ways, like a wild horse dragging a cowboy into a ruined ranch to save a woman on the brink of death. He didn't know how long the storm would last. He didn't know if supplies would hold or if the frost would retreat. But for now, the fire burned, Clara's breaths were steady, and the world beyond the cabin was a blur of white. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, he allowed himself to believe that the morning might bring more than just survival. It might bring a chance at hope, at life, at family. The snow had finally eased by mid-morning, though the world outside the cabin remained a frozen wasteland. Icicles hung from the eaves like jagged teeth, and the plains stretched out, white and silent, under the pale sun. The storm had passed, but its fury had left a mark, a blanket of snow so deep that even hardy horses struggled through it. Eli knew that surviving the night was only the first challenge. Now came the task of reclaiming life in a world that had nearly swallowed it whole. Clara stirred, sitting up fully this time. Her eyes scanned the cabin, lingering on the wild horse outside, still tied but calm. For a moment, she said nothing, her gaze lost in thought. Then she spoke, her voice stronger, steadier than the night before. "We need to assess the ranch," she said, almost as if testing her own strength. "I can't leave it like this. If I do, it's gone forever." Eli nodded. "We'll do it together. But first, breakfast. You need something in your stomach if we're going to face the snow out there." They set to work, melting snow for water over the fire, using the remaining canned food sparingly. The horse nickered, impatient, and Eli chuckled, rubbing its frosted neck. "All right, you get fed first. Don't think I've forgotten about you." Once they were ready, Eli and Clara ventured outside. The cold bit through their coats, and the wind, though weaker than the storm, still carried a sharp edge. Snow crunched underfoot, and every movement was slow, deliberate. The ranch, once proud and bustling, lay in ruin. The fences were splintered, the barn partially collapsed, and the fields beneath the snow were lost to frost and ice. Clara's heart ached at the sight, but Eli placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "It's not gone," he said firmly. "Not yet. And it won't be, not if we don't give up." They began with small tasks. Eli worked on repairing the broken fence, while Clara checked the barn and salvaged what supplies she could. Old sacks of feed were damp, but enough had survived to sustain the horse and a few surviving animals. They worked in silence, communicating with gestures and brief words. The cold made everything more difficult, but it also focused them, stripped their world to essentials: survival, warmth, and hope. By midday, Eli noticed movement in the distance, a rider on horseback, emerging from the white expanse. He tensed, instinctively stepping in front of Clara. The figure drew closer, and it became clear it was another rancher from the nearby settlement. Relief washed over him. "You too survived the storm?" the rider asked, dismounting and brushing snow from his hat. "I thought the snow would take everything out here. You've got guts, surviving out in this mess." Clara nodded, her voice quiet but determined. "We managed. Barely." The man looked around at the ruined ranch, shaking his head. "This place, it'll take work. You'll need help if you want it back." Eli exchanged a glance with Clara, and in that silent moment, a plan began to form. Together, they could rebuild. Not just survive, but restore what had been lost. Over the next days, the two worked tirelessly, clearing snow, patching walls, and reinforcing fences. The horse became a steadfast companion, hauling small loads of wood and supplies. Clara's hands, once frozen and weak, regained strength, the color returning to her cheeks with each passing hour. Eli's presence was steady, unwavering, a warm anchor in a harsh, unforgiving world. Evenings were spent by the fire, sharing stories and quiet laughter. The bond between them grew, forged not through romance alone, but through shared struggle and survival. They were, in every sense, family now, bound by necessity, trust, and the shared understanding that life on the frontier was both fragile and precious. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the snow-covered hills, Clara looked out over the fields, a faint smile on her lips. "I never thought I'd see this place live again," she said softly. "I thought the storm would take it all. Take me with it." Eli joined her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "It's not the storm that decides your fate," he said. "It's you. And me, I suppose. We fought for it, and won." The horse nickered, nudging them gently as if in agreement. Clara laughed, a sound that rang clear and bright, echoing across the silent plains. For the first time in months, maybe years, she felt hope. She felt life. In the weeks that followed, the ranch slowly began to regain its former strength. Neighbors arrived to offer aid, impressed by the determination of the two who had survived the storm. Supplies were brought in, fences rebuilt, and animals tended. The cabin, though still weathered and scarred, became a home once more, warmed by fire, hope, and the human spirit. Through it all, the wandering horse remained by their side, a symbol of the strange, serendipitous fate that had brought them together. Eli often joked that the horse had a sixth sense, knowing exactly where it needed to lead him, and perhaps, in some small way, he believed it. One snowy evening, as the fire crackled and the wind whispered outside, Clara turned to Eli, gratitude shining in her eyes. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. "You don't have to," he replied. "Just keep this place alive. That's thanks enough." She smiled, resting her head on his shoulder, and for a long moment they simply sat, listening to the storm that had passed and the wind that now carried only whispers of life and renewal. The West was still wild. The snow would return, as it always did, fierce and unrelenting. But for now, in that ruined ranch, a cowboy and a rancher woman had found something more enduring than frostbite, starvation, or despair. They had found family, forged in the harshest crucible, tempered by fire and snow, and strengthened by the improbable kindness of a wandering horse. And in the quiet that followed, as the wind softened and the plains stretched into endless white, life began anew, not as it had been, but stronger, wiser, and bound by the unbreakable ties of survival, trust, and human connection. Eli looked out at the horizon, the horse grazing peacefully nearby, and whispered almost to himself, "We made it. We really made it." Clara, feeling warmth not just from the fire but from something deeper, nodded. "Yes, we did. Together." The ruined ranch had been saved, not just by hands or strength, but by courage, persistence, and a bond that neither storm nor snow could ever break. And somewhere in the distance, the wind carried a promise, that no matter how wild the West became, life, love, and family could endure, even in the coldest, harshest places.